I'd like to talk about is my work in Haiti, how I ended up down there. It's not exactly a straight path. My 5-year plan hasn't worked out very well going forward. I was hoping to be an astronaut, but as close as I made that was the Vomit Comet, the weightless trainer that NASA uses. So what happens when opportunity meets hope? You've all heard about Haiti and the grimness in Haiti, the earthquake in Haiti, that type of thing. But what you haven't heard about is the hardworking people that are in Haiti, the proud history of Haiti. Haiti was discovered in 1492 by Columbus. It doesn't get any earlier than that, December 6, 1492. In 1804, they got their independence from France. They were the richest colony in the Western Hemisphere. 40% of the income of Napoleon's income came from Haiti. And he was not very happy when he lost Haiti. And he actually dispatched his brother-in-law with 30,000 troops to come to Haiti, recapture Haiti. And then what we missed in our schools here in the United States is 20,000 of those 30,000 troops were bound for New Orleans to secure the Louisiana Territory. But what happened was 26,000 of the 30,000 troops were dead, sick, or wounded within 6 months of landing in Haiti. And so no troops came to New Orleans. So when Jefferson sent an envoy to Paris to buy New Orleans to secure the Mississippi River, Napoleon said, "Hey, I got a deal for you." And so we were able to buy the Louisiana Territory at a really good deal. And I say a really good deal because Napoleon only charged 75% of what he wanted reparations from the Haitians, those ungrateful slaves in Haiti that had to pay for their independence. It wasn't until 1947 that they actually paid off their indebtedness to France. And the United States, in gratitude for that, embargoed Haiti until 1863, because again, they didn't want that nasty idea of slave independence spreading to the United States. It was only with the Emancipation Proclamation that the Haitians were recognized as a legitimate government. This is one of the wonders of the world that was built by the Haitians to protect against the French reinvasion there. Haiti's wealth in 1800 was bigger than the 13 colonies in the United States. So as I go through this, I'd like you to think back to the United States and where we're at. 200 years ago, they were wealthier than we are today. Where are we at right now? And what can we learn from the Haitians? Can we learn something from them as we go through that? So how did they end up to be that? One of my criteria for life is beyond strength is balance. As a society, we're based on strength. Originally, it was how far you could throw a rock, a spear, use a sword. Today, it's how much money you have. And I think you'll see in Haiti a society that's out of balance. And I personally feel here in the United States that we're going that way also. Air Force Academy graduation, people ask me how it was to go to the Air Force Academy, and I tell them it's a great place to be from, and the best view is in the rearview mirror. But I balanced that off with the Peace Corps in Botswana. Corps cadets, Peace Corps, try to keep those things in balance. Flew C-130s, 4-engine turboprop. The gentleman on the rear of the scooter there that's trying to hang on is Arlen Lacour. He's a Ministry of Agriculture agronomist. 80% of the Haitians that have college degrees are outside of Haiti because there's no jobs. They're either in the States, in Canada, or France because there's simply no jobs. He was educated at the University of Florida, master's level, and he's chosen to stay in Haiti to work for his country going forward. I started out my career after I got out of the Air Force with Procter Gamble. Making diapers is a worthwhile profession, but it wasn't exactly where I wanted to go. I went to Haiti in 2003 to replicate the Grameen Bank Village Phone Program. A woman gets a loan for a phone and then turns around and sells the use to her friends and neighbors. I knew a lot about cellular at that time. I'd been running a cellular company in the US, but I knew nothing about development really or microfinance. So I went down there, put together a partnership between the largest microfinance and the largest cellular company. And then 6 months later, there was a revolution. President Aristide was driven out of the country. The cell company dropped off the face of the earth because they couldn't even get fuel to their equipment. So left and went in the Peace Corps. When I came out of the Peace Corps, I went to a conference in Africa, and a United Nations conference in Africa, and ran into this cell phone company, an Irish cell phone company that had just gotten an award from the World Bank for their work in Jamaica. And at the end of the talk, they said, "Oh, by the way, we just got a license for Haiti." So I approached it was a gentleman who was on their board of directors. I approached him about the Village Phone program, and so I went back there in 2006 and worked for 15 months to put together this program. When people started putting cell phones in developing countries, the question was, why would anybody want a cell phone when they can't eat, when they don't have enough food for their kids, they don't get an education? But the reality is, more than anything else, people want to talk, people want to connect, and we find out instead of spending a half a day to drive to the community to find that the doctor that you want to see isn't there, you can make a phone call and find out whether he's there or not. Every single thing you use a phone for, people in developing countries use it for, but more so. You can go and get in your car and drive, or the wireline phone and go. They can't do that. Well, it turns out that this Irish cell phone company, there were 2 cell phone companies in Haiti when I went, and they were a third one that came in there. They used a different business model. And they came in, and when you talk about socially responsible companies, they came in with a model that everyone should have a phone. And they did this in the United States. When I call you, you pay, I pay, we both pay. In Europe, it's only the calling party pays. Well, that's the model they introduced in Haiti. They also billed by the second instead of by the minute. And they put the cell phones at cost as opposed to trying to make a profit on those. And those 3 things together, Haiti had a population at that time of about 9 million people. 2.1 million people had a cell phone within 18 months. They democratized communications in a way that I could never have hoped to do with a village phone program. But along that way, the question came up, how do you charge a cell phone in a country that has no electricity? When I was living in Port-au-Prince, I had a fairly nice studio apartment with a refrigerator, and but I had in my refrigerator, I had UGOs, unidentified growing objects. Because the electricity was only on 6 to 8 hours a day. So how do you develop an economy like that? The people, the textile manufacturers, those types of things that go into Haiti to work right now, they have to produce their own power, they have to produce all their own utilities, they have to bring in their own security. All the things that we just take for granted here that government provides for us today, they have to bring into it. If you don't have electricity, how could you develop electricity? And I found out that in most of Haiti, power grids had been installed in the 1980s, and if you followed the wires, you would find this big Caterpillar generator. And I thought, oh, that's easy. We'll get the United Nations to fix the generators, and then the community will have power. And that was like 3.2 seconds, and then I realized, duh, what are they going to put in the generator? How are they going to find fuel for this? And so I was in a real quandary with that, and I guess I was really bored because I read this. It was a 150-page USAID report, and I'm a big believer in synchronicity, that stuff happens for a purpose and a reason. And I read this 150-page report, and the very end was a 20-page chapter on this plant that's native to Haiti and more productive for biodiesel than just about any other plant in the world. I called the professor at Carnegie Mellon that had written the report, and he and I talked. He told me about this guy from Athens, Georgia, a landscape architect that was also interested in this plant, and we talked back and forth. Well, remember that Irish cell phone company that I was talking about earlier? 2 weeks later, I got this call from Louise Finnegan, who is their manager for their marketing manager, and she said, do you know any projects that this group of 40 Irish entrepreneurs that are coming to Haiti to study about synchronicity could support? And so I said, stand by one, I'll get back with you really quick. Within 2 weeks, Rob, the landscape architect from Athens, Georgia, and I was living in Haiti, he's in Georgia, we'd never talked. We're emailing back and forth. We put together a proposal. I met with 10 of the 40 Irishmen. They had been drinking all night. It was a great party, I was told. And when I put the proposal to them, they said, Lass, we'll do whatever you want. Just be very quiet. Just be very quiet. So they started us out with a $40,000 grant. Okay, so I had some money and we had a potential for supply, but those of you that are business people, who's going to buy this stuff in Haiti? Well, it turns out that the number one user of diesel in Haiti is the government, which the government depends on aid, which is iffy and all that stuff. So I wasn't real enthused about them, but it so happened that the chairman of the board of Digicel was at this same party, and I gave him the proposal, would you buy this? If we produce it, would you buy it? And so Digicel, this Irish cell phone company that's introduced us to the financiers, also said, we'll buy all you can produce, because there is no power grid, and so they have generators running 24/7 in each one of the locations. So it was synchronicity, serendipity, whatever you want to call it, but that's what launched the project and we got going. One of the things that I thought about when I talked about what we can learn from Haiti is I wanted to talk about what we worry about a little bit here in the United States. Taxes are a real big issue right now in the United States. How much should people have to pay for taxes? Is it right for Warren Buffett to pay less rate of tax than the people that work for him, those types of things? Or maybe we're concerned about university, where you're going to send your kids. Are you going to Harvard, Stanford, maybe University of Chicago, or what kind of car we drive? All these things are, I do it, everybody does it in the country. But when you look at Haiti, this is a typical school in Haiti. Haiti has the largest number of private schools in the world, and they range from anywhere from horrible to wonderful. And you get what you pay for, but education, people want to send their kids to school because they know it's a better life, but they can't. We all heard about the earthquake and medical care. The medical care system in the United States, we're talking about choice of doctors and rationing care and that type of thing. Well, in Haiti, they're just interested in seeing a knowledgeable medical physician that has supplies that can help people. And finally, the infrastructure that we all take for granted that, it's really tough to pay taxes, but what about the infrastructure? I'm not drunk. I'm not tilted here. This is what the road looks like here. And this is standard transportation. This is an old dump truck that's now filled with goods and then filled with people on top of it. OSHA hasn't found Haiti yet. Most of you either work for someone or you have your own business. And every day you get up to run that business and you're counting on clients to do it, you're counting on people to help you, your business, or you're going and getting a salary at a company. Well, 80% of the people in Haiti live on the informal economy, and what that means is they're having today, every morning they're getting up and figuring out how they're going to feed themselves and their children. It's tough, and it's a barter economy. 60% of the food is imported into Haiti. It's cheaper to import subsidized rice from Miami than it is to grow rice in Haiti for the farmers. This is a typical street scene there. Have you ever wondered what happened to old school buses in the United States when they die? Well, they don't die, they go to Haiti and get repainted and everything. Those are some of the power lines that I'm talking about that are up there, but there's no power on the lines. Typical washing. Can you imagine doing your wash by hand? It gets really clean, but it's really tough on the clothes, I'll tell you. Education's the way out. This is where I actually stay when I go down there. This is a school, and they've got small facilities, 750 kid Montessori type school, kindergarten through 8th grade. I would imagine that most of the kids in this school, if they were given equivalency exams with U.S. kids, would score as good or better than the U.S. kids. So there is excellent education available. But the problem is it's all through a charity here, a charity there. It's not the government providing it all. And so again, I bring you back to what can we learn from Haiti? What can we get out of this? The other big thing that you've probably heard about in Haiti is the environmental devastation. A satellite view of Haiti. Haiti is a tropical rainforest island that's been 98% deforested. It started with 1492 with teak wood coming back to Europe, and has just continued on and gotten worse. And this is a typical hillside now today. And you ask, why haven't there been a reforestation program? Well, the reality is, let's say a consultant like you or I go down there, we get paid $100,000 a year, we organize the communities together, all the villagers work together, they get $5 a day pay, everybody's happy, they have jobs we plant 1 million trees over the hillsides. The grant dries up, I go home, and the people are left there with no jobs and no income. If your children are hungry, they're not really enthused about waiting until those trees grow up to get big enough to be lumber. So they chop down the trees, make charcoal out of them, and sell the charcoal. The children eat, but the hillsides look like this, and the cycle continues. You've got to have a tree worth more as a tree than it is as charcoal. This is a list from palm oil is the best plants you can get for biodiesel for plant oil, coconut oil, avocado. Who would ever use a good avocado for biodiesel? I think there's a law against that somewhere. But right beyond that is Jatropha here. Not only is it very good for biodiesel, but it's already in Haiti. It's a native plant. Just to give you a comparison, rapeseed canola is 50% less effective, and that's what they use for biodiesel in Europe. And then there's soybeans that we use here in the United States. And so we're almost 5 times more effective than Jatropha. You haven't heard about this plant because it doesn't like frost, so that's why it's not in the United States. So any place you have frost, it's not going to grow very well. This is the land that we're using, 30,000 hectares of land that's government owned. Just to give you orientation, this is the Dominican Republic border here. This is just the main road that the United Nations put in to facilitate commerce going back and forth, and it's been extremely effective in improving the economy in that area. The characteristics of Jatropha, it's a perennial plant, high oil yield, doesn't compete with food. This is a typical land that we're using. Anybody been to West Texas before? I don't know what it looks like now with the drought out there, but this is what I remember, mesquite and grasses and stuff like that. So it used to be a sisal plantation, and now it's sitting idle today. We're trying to develop the entire value chain because no one was growing the plant, no one was processing it into biodiesel. And by the way, the break-even point on this is about $60 a barrel for biodiesel. So as long as petroleum diesel is above $60, we can make a profit on this. No one was growing it because no one was buying it. No one was buying it because no one was growing it. So our process is we're trying to develop the entire value chain, all the way from planting, teaching planters how to plant the seeds, how to harvest the seeds, turning the seeds into oil, and we've got help from the University of Illinois in doing that. The oil then can be used for cooking, it can be used to produce soap, it can be used for lighting, or it can be transformed into biodiesel. So we have a full chain that we're developing all the way down. In addition, we found that plants and animals like growing in between Jatropha. Think of an orange grove that you're familiar with or something like that. The land in between it, we're actually raising sheep in between ours there. This is Luann here, a typical harvest type thing. We're looking at honey. The seed cake can actually be used as fertilizer. And if we can develop the technology, the seed cake, what remains after you squeeze out the oil, actually has more protein than soybeans, so it can be used for an animal feed. Our work has begun to pay off. We're in our 4th year now, and we're finally getting truckloads coming in. I know the program will be successful when growers start bringing their seeds in their own pickup truck. This is the type of facility, a small facility we use for producing the biodiesel. We still have many challenges / opportunities, and those go on and on. The thought, though, that I'd like to leave you with is we're not alone in this. You've seen what's happening to education. Is education a big discussion here in the United States? I would think so. You've seen what's happened to the Haitian environment. Is that a discussion in the United States? Not so much, but it should be. And what about the economy and jobs and those types of things? How can you have a country that's not producing anything, that's just depending on bankers, that's on the financial sector and the service industry? You guys know better than anybody else in the design How do you begin to have an economy with doing that actually allows people to produce in it and participate? And just in case you think Haiti doesn't impact you at all, does anybody recognize this skyline? Chicago, for those of you that don't. Anybody recognize this gentleman, Jean-Baptiste de Sable? Well, it so happens that de Sable is now credited with founding Chicago. If you go down Michigan Avenue right to the Chicago River, there's a bust of de Sable. Jean-Baptiste was born in St. Mark, Haiti. Chicago was founded by a Haitian. Haiti was more wealthy than the United States 200 years ago. When I was telling somebody about this presentation, they said, leave me with something I can do. Don't leave me in the downers. And what I say to you is, if your passion is education, go for it. Look at the difference you can make in education by speaking out. If your passion is the economy, the environment, speak out. Now is the time to make a difference. We've got to do that. Thank you.